I'm Marilyn French, and I am Chase's and Chelsea's grandmother. And
where are we right now?
we're in my home in Waterflow.
Where's Waterflow? Imagine somebody, 100 years from now.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is Waterflow, New Mexico. And it's been here many years, and the pioneers settled in here, and I come from a Hatch family, and go ahead and ask.
So where were you born, Grandma?
I was born in Farmington in a hospital.
And that's just down the road from
San Juan
Yeah.
Hospital. It's in Farmington.
Okay. And what are the names of your parents?
My father's name is Robert Calvin Hatch, and my mother's name was Violet Lenore Reed.
And where did they both come from? Were they from this area?
They were from this area, and they came with their parents, and they settled in this area.
That's great. So where did you live growing up? You were born in Farmington. Did you live in Farmington? And where did you live?
I lived in Kirtland, and my father had built a rock house for us, and he and Uncle Claude went up in the rocks way in the back area of Waterflow and Fruitland, and they actually broke the rock and chiseled it and brought it home. And he was both of them were good rock masons. And he built that home, and it's still there. But it was beautiful when my mother and dad married and started building on that house. And they had a beautiful, huge lawn. And they had a hedge around it. And, let's see, we had a huge garden. And my mother did a lot of canning for the winter.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of things did your mom grow in the garden? What kind of vegetables and fruits?
Just about every kind of vegetable. We did not have fruit trees. My aunt had fruit trees, enough for everybody. She sold her fruit, and there was lots of fruit in this country, down in this area. And so she had a huge corn that she could can corn, and they had potatoes and carrots, radishes, lettuce, everything you can think of.
And so you were talking about how your dad had built your house and done all that masonry. What was his occupation? What kind of work did he do?
That was his occupation. He was a mason and a carpenter, and he had built lots of houses and fireplaces and things like that.
Awesome. So, what are some memories that you have of your childhood? Maybe with your siblings. How many siblings did you have?
I had one sister, Sharon,
Sharon, yeah.
and two brothers, and they were younger. Well, Sharon was the oldest, and then me, and then Joe and Jim.
What kind of games did you guys like to play together?
Oh, we were quite a bit far in age, like, you know.
Oh, okay.
And my sister was 4 years older than me. And we did play games, hide and seek mainly.
Oh, yeah.
We had fun because we had a neighborhood that was full of families with children our age. So we did everything we could think of and then some.
So who were some of your friends growing up in the neighborhood? Did you have cousins or was it just friends that lived nearby, or who was it?
Well, for a while, Sheila Gay lived across the street from us, and we had a really good time.
And she's one of your cousins.
She's my cousin.
Yeah. How is she related exactly?
Her mother was my mother's sister.
And you guys just talked today, right? On the phone? Yeah.
Yeah, we talk often. A lot of my friends lived just a block away, like Marilyn Clough was one of my good friends while I was little, and her brother, well, they actually weren't brothers, but they were raised together by Mrs. Grandma Clough. And he was fun. We all had a good time.
Did you spend very much time running around kind of by the river, or would you go out to the hills, or where would you kind of be most of the time as a kid?
Spend your free time.
Well, we were everywhere. My Uncle Sturt and Uncle Claude had a trading post in Fruitland, and that was down by the river. So when we were old enough, they'd let us go swim down there.
That is so fun. I bet you had a fun time doing that.
Oh, we had a fun time.
Yeah.
And we went up in the hills a lot, and we found artifacts from the old people, the Navajo people that lived up in there.
So what kind of things would you find?
Mostly broken pieces of pottery and then arrowheads, that kind of thing.
That's really cool.
Yes.
That's not something that any kid just gets to grow up with. That's really
No,
neat.
they don't. We had fun.
Yeah, that's kind of like finding treasure or something.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still haven't found a shark tooth in Florida where I grew up. So that's great that you found all those things.
Yeah. So what about some of your aunts and uncles? Did you have any of them that were like really good influences in your life that you felt close to or thought, I want to be like them, or anything like that?
Well, first of all, my grandmother, we called her Granny Teal, and she was my mother's mother, and they lived in in Kirtland,
Yeah.
and had a big yard, and all of us grandkids would collect there. But anyway, to play, you know. And her husband was named Arthur Reed, and she was from the McDaniel family in Bloomfield, was her parents, lived there. And anyway, they had 10 children, and 8 of them was what do I want to say? 8 of them was sisters, so we had aunts all over the place, and
Station of ants.
and cousins. But 2 of Granny Till's children passed away before they got very old. And then my father's side is the Hatch side, and we played down at Uncle Stuart and Claude's. Well, actually, the old house that their father was named Joseph Hatch, and he was Ira Hatch's son. And anyway, they lived in that part of the house, and then they had the trading post, because my grandfather, Joe, was also a trader, and he had built that for him. So he even went on horse and buggy, you know, or wagon is what I need to say, trips to Santa Fe to trade skins and things that they might want, you know, baskets or rugs. And that's where he got all of his jewelry. And he had really beautiful jewelry. The stones were absolutely beautiful. And so my father didn't really work in trading post business. He was, like I said before, he was a mason and built homes, and he built lots of fireplaces in homes. And he had 8 brothers, and he had actually 10, because 2 of them passed away. And they were all boys, except for the oldest was a girl, and that was my Aunt Myrtle. And she married an Ashcroft. And I can name their names if you want me to.
Yeah, do it. That'd be
okay.
Great. Yeah.
Well, there was Myrtle, and then there was Joe, and he also was a trader, only in the Gallup area. And there was Flander, and he worked for traders in their posts. And there was Flander. I just said Flander, didn't I? Mm-hmm. And told you about him. I'm trying to think of all their names.
There's so many of them. Yeah.
It's already impressive you've named.
They, the next one was I'm trying to remember. Ray's dad. Why can't I think of Ray's dad's name? I'll come back to him.
Yeah,
I was trying to get the older ones down, They were, let's see, Vivian and, let's see, Calvin, that was my father. And there was Stuart and Claude. And I'll think of the other one's name. And then they had I believe they just had one boy that passed away, actually, instead of two. He and his little friend were just really good buddies. And it was kind of a sad but good feeling about his death. His friend died with all these germs that were around here. I'll say that he died with like a real bad flu. And they were just, my uncle then, that was just a little boy too, and they were just best buddies and were together all the time. And anyway, he died, that his best friend died, and then about a month later, he died. My uncle, as a child, died. And he told his mother, I can see Tony right now. He's here, Mother, and he wants me to go with him. And he had a high fever, and he was coming down with something, and he died that night.
Wow.
And he's buried up at the cemetery up here at Kirtland Fruitland Cemetery. And they had a cement headstone built, and it is where he put his little hand when they were doing some work with the cement. And his mother and Dad thought it was so cute they cut it out. Well, that was his headstone then when he died, and his little hand mark still is in that cement. So I remember my uncle's name, and it just went again. I'll have to.
It's all right.
It takes me a couple of minutes to recall.
Yeah.
But most of them are buried up here in the Fruitland and Kirtland Cemetery. And they're Ira Hatch's, their grandfather. He'd be my great-grandfather, but he was buried there. And he has a big stone granite headstone that we had made for him later. I was kind of the head of it because all he had was just a long stone, and it was just right for a foot for you to go in their house. And it was his foot stone, I guess is what you call it. And they put it up there on his grave. And it's still there today.
So that was a part of his house originally?
It was as you go in the door,
Like
you
the
would,
threshold? Yeah, wow.
you would walk up on it. And, there's lots of stories, of course, about him. Let's see. Well, that's the aunts and uncles.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
So, how often would you all get together as extended family or anything like that? Would you all get together and have dinners or little reunions?
We got together every Sunday weekend after church. We'd go home to our own homes and eat. And then everybody would gather there because they had such a huge yard. And then they had all kinds of fruit trees. And they would bring little horses that the family kids had. And we'd ride horseback and everything. And we had a really good time while the aunts and uncles or their husbands were visiting. And everybody had it was just something we always did.
Every Sunday, that's amazing. To spend that much time as family together like that.
It was amazing. And I got taught a lot of things. And it was all good.
Yeah. So what do you feel like are some of the things that you took away from those relationships? Like what did you learn that either was direct, that they taught you directly, or that you just observed and kind of saw?
Well, they taught me how wonderful families was, for one thing, because we just couldn't think of anybody dying, we were just little kids, and let's see, they were all LDS, they were Mormon people, and I'm going to have to get a drink of water. Can you turn it off?
Oh yeah.
I don't want to cough all through
Oh
it.
no, it's okay. Whenever you want to drink, we can actually just when Chase is editing the video, he can just cut that part out.
Oh.
So whenever you need a drink, you can just get a drink. He can just cut it out later.
I'm going to run and grab my computer real quick.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Cool, Grandma. Those are some cool stories. So are there any other types of questions you want us to ask you? Is it more general, like what was your teenage years like? Or do you want more specific questions about like what things did you feel or learn from that experience?
Okay.
So yeah, whatever types of questions we can ask, or if any stories come up that you want people to know about later, you can share them too.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's open to anything. Yeah, I'm gonna grab a tissue. Do you need a tissue or anything?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna blow my nose.
Seems like in the evening time is when I get. Yeah.
Chelsea disappeared.
She went to get us some Kleenex.
That's
our noses are both running.
That's a smart move.
Yeah, I got this lollipop.
Oh, good. You
Who's
have
it for,
it.
though? Let me
For
ask you
Grandma
that.
Fred.
Oh, no, you can have it.
Okay.
I have a red one in
Oh
there
yeah. Oh thanks. Yeah. Whenever. Oh.
on the
Oh,
counter.
good. Yeah.
I can go get it.
Do you want one? I can get it for you. The red one. You want one, Chase?
I'm okay, thank you, though. It's funny, I took this cart over there so I could empty it out, and then I only emptied half of it, and then it filled up, so I gotta empty it out again.
Really?
But really this time, not just
Okay.
pretend. Let's see.
Maybe. Here, I can move this chair closer to you, Grandma, so you can put stuff on it.
Oh,
Will
okay.
you be able to see this?
Oh, that's fine.
No?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So she has a little like table area.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Can you see it in the?
No, it's totally fine.
You can't see it on the shot.
Yeah, I was telling Grandma it's up above the chest, or it's from here up. So got plenty of room.
You want a lollipop?
I'm
I'm
okay.
not sharing this.
I don't doubt it.
They help your throat.
Oh yeah.
They do.
It's like a cough drop.
You know, I thought cough drops were special.
It's
And
just sugar.
yeah, and I went to the temple one time, and I was having a coughing fit, and one of the temple workers just gave me a handful of candy, with, like butterscotch and little peppermints and things like that, and I was like, "What's candy gonna do for me?" And I popped one in, and it saved the day.
It does.
And that's when I
Yes.
looked it up and saw that cough drops are there's. You know, they're a little bit more pointed, but it's essentially candy.
Right.
Yeah.
They are.
But it does feel nice whenever you get the menthol ones that kind of cool you a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe they've got, is it eucalyptus in there too sometimes?
Eucalyptus,
Yeah.
hibiscus. I'm kidding.
Those are good. I've had a lot of times like that though, where I have started coughing, and then somebody in the back would just pass me up a cough drop.
Right.
I'm like, wow, I thought I was going to be coughing the whole time. Thanks for saving me. So now I want to be the guy that has a whole pocket full just in case.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's kind of fun if you can help save somebody else.
Right. It is.
No, and especially not during the quiet moments. Yeah, we had thought about trying to go to the temple, and then Dad and Nancy said it was going to be closed for this whole time that we come down for cleaning. We're like, oh.
What?
Well,
So
yeah.
next time.
Yeah, we'll get it next time, but that'd be so fun.
Yeah.
Let's see, it's got 1 minute left, it says. I just got to reform the card.
About like 45 minutes?
Yeah, so we still have plenty of time. We got 45 minutes to, still be free. And
what are some points you want to talk about, Grandma?
yeah, is there anything you
like top 3 things that you want to share about your life that you want us to ask you
Well,
about?
you just go on and ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Maybe probably we'll talk about kids.
Oh yeah, kids.
And, yeah,
That's a
about
good
Grandpa
question.
French. That'd be good.
Yeah. Because we could break it up like each section is like 15 minutes,
Yeah.
so that we
That's a good
don't
idea.
miss it out or miss out on it.
Yeah. It's been really nice having the camera equipment so we can do stuff like this.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
You got a good deal on these too.
Yeah, I did.
There was a photographer selling them as a set of 2 cameras,
Mm-hmm.
and it was
Yeah.
the price of 1 camera.
Right.
So it was really nice.
Yeah, 2
It is very nice.
Put this here for a second. I'll fix this later. If you ever need a tissue, Grandma, just let me know. I'll pass it over.
This will be enough.
Okay. Yeah, and if there's ever a moment you need to blow your nose or anything, don't worry, we can cut it out.
Yeah.
From the footage.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Where's the button? Okay, so where did we leave off? We were talking about things that you had learned. You were talking about family, and that was such an important thing that you learned from your family.
Right.
Were there any other things that come to mind that maybe your parents taught you, or your aunts and uncles, or even maybe teachers in school and in church?
Well, yes, there was things like that. I come up with the name of my uncle.
Oh, did you? Yeah, what's his name?
Leonard.
Leonard.
Yes, and he had a son named Ray, and he was best friends with my brother Jim. Okay, what else?
Oh, so yeah. So what about some of the things that you learned from other people? Yeah.
Well, you learn so many things I can't even think of.
One thing I know about you is that you're a really hard worker. Is that something
Yes.
you learned while you were growing up?
It was. My mother was a real hard worker, and all of her sisters, of course, families back then came from just pitiful, because they had to have their crops in to be able to eat next winter and sell some of it and buy clothing and for the kids to have clothes to go to school. Let's see. We always called Granny Till's husband Papa. That's what he wanted to go by. And I remember him as a real tall man, and he always wore a black hat. It was kind of like a cowboy hat, black. And he drove the school bus for many years. And I got to ride it even before I went to school because, well, that was during the war. World War II came on. And I was born in 1941. And so my dad, he went into the Army, and his brother Stuart and his brother Claude, there was 3 brothers that all went into that Second World War. But anyway, my mother had to work during that time, and she worked for a man. Let's see, what was his name? Anyway, he made jewelry and sold it, and he hired her to help with the stones and get them all polished and ready to go into the bracelets and rings. And so she worked with a lot of turquoise during that time.
I didn't know that.
And his last name was Egger. The Eggers is what they were named. And Yeah, he was kind of a well-to-do man. They weren't LDS. Actually, I don't know if they had a church they went to, but they were a nice family, and they had 2 daughters. And one of them, his name was Janet, and she was my sister's best friend all through high school. Now I'm off on something else.
No, we're trying to get the big picture of your
Well,
life.
okay.
All these things are a part of it.
Well, I had been born in 41, so I was just a baby when my dad finally went in. He didn't go in, and he didn't actually fight the wars like the other 2. He went in as a builder, and all these buildings and cities and towns, were just tore up by the bullets and everything. And he went in, and he was one of the men that worked rebuilding these countries.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, I didn't. Do you know?
They rebuilt railroad tracks,
Really?
everything.
For the other countries that
Uh-huh.
were wow.
Yes.
It sounds like the beginnings of Mormon helping hands.
Yes, it probably was.
So do you know what part of the world he over in Europe, or where did he go?
Well, he was in the Philippines.
Really?
He worked there and rebuilt a lot of stuff. A lot of it was tore up, by the bomb that they had. I guess that was Japan, huh?
Yeah.
Where the bomb was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he worked a lot there rebuilding
Oh, so Asian countries.
schools
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, anyway, the war was over, and he came home, and I was 3, almost 4 years old when he came home. And I remember him getting off the bus. He had his uniform on, and he had a great big knapsack, is what people call them today. But it held a lot of things. And he brought back things for all of us.
Oh.
I can remember some little shoes that he brought back for me. And I was so proud of those little shoes. And anyway, that was the start of we had not a recession, but a full-blown, what do you call it? Depression then, because all the men had gone to war.
Yeah.
And things just went, as well as they could here in the States. And a lot of our teachers had no education, college education, but they filled in as teachers and that kind of thing. My dad was able to find work. Him and several of his brothers, they went to build, I believe it's called Boulder Dam outside of Las Vegas. Have you ever been there?
I maybe have. That sounds familiar.
It's one of the biggest dams that they've ever built.
Yeah.
And they needed that water to go to to California and other places. And anyway, by the time he got home, I was old enough to go to school. And I remember my first grade teacher. She was Mrs. White. And I loved school, but it was so cold here. When I was little, it snowed. I mean, it snowed clear up to underneath the windows. And we made great big snowmen, not little ones. And they'd stay all winter.
Wow.
But anyway, I loved grade school. My second grade teacher was Mrs. Swap. And then it gets kind of vague till I get to the 8th grade. And I remember that man. He was ornery, and his name was Mr. Gage.
Oh.
And he had a ruler, and he'd come up and down the rows of the kids. If they weren't doing their schoolwork, they were in trouble. So I got my hands hit several times, and a ruler hurts on the hands.
Oh, yeah. My mom told, she got hit with the ruler a few times, too.
So
what were your favorite...
ask some questions
What were your
about...
favorite parts of grade school? Why did you love it so much? Was it the
For-
teachers?
Well,
Friends?
I liked the teachers and friends.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
My best friend started school with me, and her name was Janie Farnsworth and Judy Klein and Arlene Nelson. And then I remember the boys because Billy Swap was my first boyfriend.
Wow, Grandpa.
And
How
his
old were you?
first grade. And anyway, his mother was the second grade teacher.
Oh.
But there was so many. Well, there wasn't a huge class, but so many of my friends that I started school with still live in the area somewhere. They've moved off and then they come back, And we have reunions about every 2 years. So far, they're all there.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
And
like decades later, that's so
Right.
great.
Let's see, as a child, I had mumps and measles and chicken pox, and I had bad asthma.
Oh.
And I had to be taken in several times to a doctor to get me breathing again. So anyway, those were the illnesses. We did a lot of fun things, but we had outdoor bathrooms because our school was old. And like I said, it was during the Depression, and we didn't have indoor. The boys went on one side and the girls on the other side, and they were great big bathrooms where you could go in and use the bathroom. And then they did have a sink couple of sinks that we could wash our hands in. And we didn't have indoor bathrooms for a long time through, I think it was about the 6th or 7th grade and 8th that they remodeled our school and we had bathrooms then.
Oh, good. I'm sure that was hard in the winter to use the restroom.
It
right?
was very hard.
Oh.
Very cold, but we were raised up in it, so we didn't know any better.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other things that you might remember kind of like that, where maybe the Depression or the war impacted your life, but you didn't really know that it was that way because it's just how you were living? Was there anything else kind of like that? Maybe kind of like how you talked about your mom working, and what about, was there always food? Was there plenty of food? Did you guys have everything that you need? Did you ever have to help other people or anything like that?
During the war, there was a lot of hobos.
Mm-hmm.
They had been in the war and had to leave because they were not able to. They got hurt, shot or something, but we had lots of hobos, and they would stop, and they just stopped for a meal, and my mother always gave them something to eat. It was usually beans and potatoes. That's mainly what you lived on during the Depression.
Wow.
And of course, we had chickens. Most people did, though. And so we always had eggs. And they killed the chickens for meat, too. So, let's see. The Depression was real hard on people all over the United States. And most of these men that would come by were looking for work. And if the farmers put in there were cutting hay or stuff, they would give them jobs for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then they'd head on to another area. They'd go to Arizona. There was lots of jobs picking oranges and fruit, nuts and stuff. As a child, you don't realize you're in a depression. You just know that things aren't right. Everybody looks real sad, and they're doing the best they can. And I remember going to Marilyn Clough's house, and this happened to lots of children. I could go there and play for about an hour, and it seemed like an hour lasted half the day. We were always hungry, and Marilyn's grandmother had just brought out loaves of bread, and Marilyn slipped in there and cut one loaf of bread, and she made peanut butter and honey sandwiches for us. We were really smacking it down, I'll tell you. And her grandma came back from a Relief Society meeting, and here we were all eating her fresh bread. It was just one loaf, but I mean, that tasted so good. And anyway, when she got home, she was not happy with us. And she said, Mary Lee, you know you don't cut my fresh bread. I let it, set a while. And then I cut it. And you must remember, we do not feed the neighbors' children that you have playing here. That's our rule. We just can't feed them. And I went home walking real sad because I had ate the biggest peanut butter sandwich. I was filled with food, but I felt real sorry for my friend. She was embarrassed,
Yeah, we can fix that.
It's fine like that.
I'll just this. Perfect.
so I learned a
That's
lesson.
funny story. Oh man.
So what about kind of as you're going into middle school and that kind of thing? How did your relationships change? Did you just get closer with people, or did you? What kind of things were you interested in?
Well, as I was going into, we called it grade school, clear through the 8th then. And then you went into just regular high school. And the depression was going away finally. And there was men working, building homes right here in our area. And so my dad was able to have work. And my friendships were still the same with my friends all through school. We were close friends. And I guess that's why we have the reunion so much, because we like to keep in taps with each other. Because we're all spread all over, really. But they will come. They will come long distances to the reunion.
That's wonderful.
So what about, you talked about schooling and how you liked being around friends and some of your teachers you liked. What were some of your favorite subjects? What did you like learning about and doing?
Well, actually, history was my favorite. I loved history and still do. And I wasn't very good. Then they taught us shorthand because they thought we'd all be secretaries one day and we'd need shorthand. And I was terrible at it, but lots of them were. And I liked English, and I was not good at math. I liked science. Those were the main classes. I remember, though, being embarrassed. I told when we signed up for classes, I put that I wanted to speak Spanish. So they put me in the Spanish class and everything. My mother didn't even know I was going into the Spanish class. And I had cut out homemaking to go into it. And she come to our high school, and she said, I want my daughter out of that class, and I want her in homemaking. That's what she needs, not to speak Spanish. So,
Oh, Grandma.
Can you turn it off a minute? Your dad is leaving, and he wanted to talk to you, but he saw that you were filming, so...
Oh, I didn't know you wanted to learn Spanish. That's
I
pretty
did.
Cool.
You heading out, or what are you doing? Okay. We'll probably take off in about 15 minutes.
I saw the rug in the garage.
Oh,
Is it okay? Are you sure you're not gonna use it?
definitely. You
Really?
can have it. And is there any bedspreads that you need?
Alright, sounds good.
I
We'll
Or-
see you in about 30
You're-
think
minutes.
we're okay with bedspreads.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, Chase, do you think we need any bedspreads? Grandma said, or do you think we're good?
I think we're probably good
think
for right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Grandma.
I have so many that I... What is it? It's called Little... he's a little boy from a family,
Yeah.
and he reminds me so much of Joy when he was little.
Really?
And he even kind of looks like him, because he's
Really?
got black hair. And
Aw. Oh yeah, I
But-
forgot Joel had black hair before.
Joey always would button. He insisted that I button that top button. And that's how this show is. This little boy, he insists. And so he's always got his shirt just, his hair's combed perfect. And anyway, he broke something of his mother's that she really liked. And the dad said, okay, you're going to have to pay for it. And so he goes and throws newspapers. That is the funniest show. But they plop those newspapers right in their driveway, and he has to roll them.
Yeah.
And he can't do it fast enough to go throw them before school. So he has a brother that just hates him and has to help him roll them. That's so funny. But anyway, he rides a bicycle, and the wagon is hooked to it that has the newspapers, and he has his training wheels on, like Joey did till he's almost 8 years old. It's just Joey made over. You've got to ask your dad what the name of that show is.
Is it the one with Sheldon? Is that the boy's name? He's really smart?
No, I think that's a different one.
Oh, okay.
This is a new
Oh, it's a
sitcom
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
on NBC or something.
Cool, yeah, we'll ask Joel about it.
That sounds funny.
Yeah.
Well, I know you kids are hungry, so you better go and... The dog would like to run with her if she wanted to go up the street. Whoops. I forgot I was hooked up.
Oh, that's okay.
That's his best time with Joey, if he can
Go walk around.
go walking.
Yeah.
He really took to Joey, and Joey just really never liked dogs that we had.
Yeah.
Never paid any attention to them.
Really?
Yeah. Mike and Corey would take over,
Yeah.
playing with them.
They love having the dogs. Yeah, I wonder, that's kind of funny, because I always assumed that he would like having lots of dogs, or being around animals, But,
He does her. He's had to, 'cause she makes you.
Yeah. It seems like she likes to follow you around and make sure you know that she's there.
She's right on Chelsea's heels, so I guess she went with her.
Yeah.
Hi.
you doing, Grandma French?
I'm doing okay.
Oh, good.
You coming on over, or where are you going?
What do you? Yeah.
It's your
stay
call.
For a little bit.
Okay. Would you mind hitting the?
Mhm.
Or actually, is it gone?
Yeah, it's gone.
Okay, cool. All right, and this one's now going as well. Okay, so let's see. Where did we leave off yesterday? We were kind of talking around middle school, is I think where we were at. I was thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about like what it was like for you in high school, like about maybe any jobs that you had, and how you what you kind of did in high school.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready.
Okay. It's rolling.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did have a job. My friend and I both decided we wanted, a job. So we went up and applied at the, where the workers go and apply for jobs.
Yeah.
And here we were, 16 years old. And they said, well, probably the only jobs we would get was babysitting or cleaning house.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to do either. And so we found out that in Shiprock, at one time, Shiprock was a real hub because the buses came through, and they always stopped at Bond and Bonds. And it was a big restaurant. It had jewelry and stuff in another room. And then on the end was a big grocery store. So we got to be waitresses there. And I've always laughed about this because back then they didn't pay kids hardly anything. And I was telling Bob my sob stories, and I said, I worked so hard, and all they paid us was 60 cents an hour. And he says, well, you probably wasn't worth that. I could never get him to feel sorry for me. Another thing that was cute, my sister they spent the money on her to have piano lessons and voice lessons by the Catholic sisters, and there was a big and still is a big Catholic church. It's on the lower road when you go through Waterflow. Anyway, and so I was telling him, they never spent any money on me. I never had lessons. And I said, I'd love to play the piano, but I just never had any lessons. And I said, and I think I could have sang as well as she did had I had voice lessons. And Bob says, well, count yourself lucky because her voice was horrible. But anyway, no, never got any sympathy from him ever.
Aww.
So that was okay. It was funny. Later on. Let's see, I got through high school then, and I had to quit my job at Bond and Bonds. I was able to have some pretty nice clothes because I worked, and was able to buy them. And I thought I was in love with this man named Bill Jones. Well, anyway, he had been married before, and I didn't even know it. And he said, well, let's get married. We'll run away because your parents would never give you permission. So we did, and that was a thing to do. My friend did the same thing, and my cousin, and we just thought it was okay. Well, anyway, we were married 18 years before we split up, and we had 3 boys, and Joel was the oldest, and he was 9 years old before I had Mike and Corey, and they were like twins because I had them like 18 months apart. So anyway, we moved. I had always liked Bob, and he was a single man, and he was a trader out on the reservation for a long time, buying rugs and that kind of thing. And he was my sister was married to his brother, Jack. So I had knew Bob for years, but he was married at that time, but we were always friends. I mean, if I ever saw him, he was real friendly. And anyway, we decided my kids, Mike and Corey, was not taking the divorce very good, and they were so sad. And there was something about Bob they just loved. And
how old were they when you guys had gotten a divorce?
Okay, Mike had just got baptized, so he was 8.5, and Corey was 6. And anyway, we decided we would get married and that we would put in our own trading post. And we had big ideas. Anyway, that's where that started.
Yeah. And so you guys knew each other for a long time before,
yes.
And you were friends.
Yes.
How did it start out that you were, eventually became people that loved each other? I mean, was it...
Well, that's something that just kind of happens when you've been through a marriage already. And he was single for 10 years. And, of course, he was having a good old time. The girls just loved him. I mean, from age 2 months old, they loved Bob, clear up to 102. And he loved them, too. I mean, he is always real huggy and nice to them, made them feel good. And anyway, Sharon and Jack invited us to go to Durango and have a steak dinner. So he happened to be at their house, and they invited him, and I was already invited and was going. And I didn't know for sure whether he would come, but he did come. And we just, from then on, it was just, I don't know, he said, the minute I saw you, and your eyes, I guess my eyes looked a lot like his mother's eyes, and he just loved his mother so much. And I thought, I've got to do something because the boys are so sad. And so I did. I married him.
That's great. Did he come out and propose to you, or was there a discussion, or how did that happen?
Yeah. Actually, we had been dating for a while. And I really didn't think much had come of it because he was quite a bit older. But
about how much older?
About 14 years. But now, as I look around, most women marry older men after they've been divorced for some reason. They just feel more comfortable. But anyway, okay, we got married, and Mike and Corey started being more happy. And Bob would pay a lot of attention to them, and they would have races and all kinds of things that they liked to do, which Bill never did with them. I'm not going to say anything bad about him, but he was a workaholic, and he made good money. Anyway, let's see, he got married before I did. He married Ann Beavers, and she was a girl that I had grown up with, more or less. She lived down in Kirtland. And, let's see, so Bob and I worked for Russell Fouts for about maybe 2 years. Bob was in the pawn shop and buying rugs and pawning. I was in the grocery store that he had. And then all of a sudden, Bob had kind of outs with Russell. Russell was very tight. He didn't pay his help at all. And Bob got to realizing that he was making him a lot of money by buying the rugs. And then Bob went out and sold them. And old Russell was in Scottsdale, Arizona, running racehorses, and he'd pay hundreds of thousands for these racehorses. And he would win some big races. Anyway, that was his love. And so we decided that we would go to the bank and see if they would go for letting us borrow some money to build our pawn shop. And they did. At that time, they were really wanting businesses to build up. So that was good. And so anyway, that's where our pawn shop started, and we worked side by side every day and did real well. Later on, as the boys got more teenagers, I didn't work so much in the pawn shop. I did the banking and stuff like that. So, what else would you like to know?
That's great. So, yeah, what about some more of the stuff about Grandpa and how he connected with Mike and Corey? It sounded like that he really took on the role as being their father.
He did.
And was a good man for them.
Right. They just were real attached to him and really liked him. And I liked him too. He was a very handsome man when he was young. Very handsome, but that wasn't everything. He just had charisma, I think, that attracted me. And
so what about some of his other qualities? Was he a good person?
Yes.
And how did he get to be that way?
He was from a real good family. His father came from Kansas, and they were really a good family. But they were like Presbyterians or something, you know. And really, Bob's father, his name was also Bob, they didn't go to any church. His father worked out on the reservation also for the government. And so Bob really didn't know anything much about God. His first wife was, she didn't believe in God, so she didn't teach her children, to believe in a God. She taught them that we came from the animals, the evolution part. And she was a smart woman. She taught school, and but Bob said all she did was read books. She never cleaned house or made nice meals. And he just got so sick of it because he worked hard. They had 5 children. So, anyway, What else?
What are some fun little moments or memories you have with Bob that, that you remember, that you like to think about sometimes?
Oh, we would go on rug trips, and he was always making up these stupid songs. And he was singing one day about a bear. And he did a lot of funny things, and I just, enjoyed it and laughed. And we really had good trips when we went together to sell our rugs.
So was he a silly guy or kind of more serious? 'Cause I
He
never
was
met him,
both,
but-
wasn't he, Chase? Yeah.
That's awesome.
So what about his musical abilities?
Oh, he could play anything by ear. He never had a lesson in his life, but he could pick up the piano. He played all kinds of things, and he could play the saxophone and the accordion and the guitar. Yeah, he was always trying to make up a song to play on the guitar. I remember that. And just did a lot of things and was home where the boys could see him and know he was there, and they grew real attached to him. And their father didn't ever really get interested in what they wanted or done or anything. But they would come, and him and Ann would come and get them once in a while. And it just broke our hearts. We didn't want them to go, even for 2 nights. But I had to do that because it was in the divorce that he had privileges of taking the boys.
So, what kind of things did Mike and Corey do when they were growing up? And Dad even. What were some of their interests?
Well, your dad was graduated from school the year that Bob and I got married, and he went to Provo after a while, and we were real glad because we had Bob's son staying with us, and he finally graduated too, but he was a real bad influence on Joey. And Joey was going to be this real good missionary to him and get him to join the church. Well, it just worked differently. I mean, Joel, once he tried marijuana with John, it was fun time, And that's all they didn't get into bad drugs or anything, but anyway, Joel decided he would go to Provo because his friends, he had some real good friends that went to school in Provo at BYU. And so he went up there, and that's where he met Jeanette. And so, let's see.
So what about, that was a big span from when you had Dad and until you had Mike, so he was an only child essentially for a few years.
He was spoiled. His grandmother and grandfather, Jones, lived across from us. And, they were just real good to him. He really liked them, and they were from Texas, so they had a lot of Texan ways about them. They all smoked. The grandmother chewed tobacco. And, when she came to visit, they'd get her a spittoon. And every time she spit, I would grab my stomach and want to throw up. But other than that, she was okay. But they didn't have really any religion in their lives.
Were they good people, or were
they were good people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could just kind of tell that they could have been maybe had a better life if they would have had.
That's right. Yeah. And I didn't pay any attention. I took my boys and went to church. And it's a good thing I did, because I did the same thing with Bob. We just went to church no matter what. And he said, I really feel left out. I think I'll go to church with you next week. And so he started going to church with us. And we tried to get John to go, but he wanted nothing to do with it. So we didn't really push him. You couldn't push him. I mean, he was a real nice kid, but let's see.
So how long?
So the missionaries, not the young missionaries, but the church missionaries. He knew them, and they asked him if they could come to the house and give him the lessons. And he agreed to that. And after they give him the last lesson, he says, well, I'm ready to be baptized. So it was Brother Beckstead, who had been a bishop all his life. And then Jess, why can't I think of Jess's last name right quick? But anyway, they're the ones that baptized him and got him into the church, and he loved it. He was real faithful and paid his tithing. He didn't see a thing wrong with it. His father said, well, son, Mormons pay 10% of their wage to their church. And Bob says, well, that's what I'll pay them. And that really made his father, he just wasn't for it. But then he saw that Bob had a good family and everything for the first time. He had a clean home. He had big meals. He loved Mike and Corey and Joey, and he loved his own kids, but they were mad at him because he joined the church. And they all said, we liked you better the way you were. Because he did smoke and he did drink some. But he cut off both of those. You wouldn't believe. The Lord had to have helped him. The boys caught him smoking one day after work, and he was back behind kind of this garage, and he thought no one would see him. He was sitting down there and decided to have a cigarette, and I wouldn't know it, and the boys wouldn't. Well, the first thing the boys did was saw him. They were out with their horses. Bob was puffing smoke up, and they come running in to tell me. So, you know what Bob's doing? He's out there smoking. And I kind of got a laugh out of it. And anyway, when he came in, he is acting so, like nothing new had happened. Nothing had happened. And I said, you know what? I smell cigarette smoke on you. And he got this funny look on his face, and he said, did Mike and Corey come in here and tell you that? And I said, yes, they did. And they both came in, yes, you were. You were smoking. We saw you. So I think that's the last time he ever had a cigarette after he had been baptized. So.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, man.
But just think how hard it would be to get off cigarettes. You'd smoke 2 packs a day.
Yeah.
And
so how, so you guys had gotten married, and how old were you when you got married?
he was 48, and I was 30. I think I was 33 or 34.
Yeah. And then how long was it after that he started wanting to go to church with you?
It was quite soon, actually. He just couldn't understand that me and the boys were all cleaned up and going to church, and so it wasn't long till he joined the church.
And did it seem like the people in your church, did they embrace him pretty openly?
Yes.
Did they just love him? Or?
They really were good. They really were. Some of them had a problem with our age difference. And one of the ones that had a real problem was just one of these real religious people, and they'd had several children. And the oldest girl, she went off to college, and she come back with a husband that was about, he was 25 years older than her, and they were married. And so this woman could never make fun of me again, She accepted us completely after that. And her daughter had a good marriage all her life.
Wow. That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah. So were there things that you guys learned as a couple that brought you closer together, like either things that you learned in communicating or what you spend your time doing? Like what did you feel like brought you two closer together after you got married?
Well, we loved the same things, really. I was raised more or less in trading posts, and I knew the rugs, the jewelry, everything about the baskets. And so, I think that brought us together real close and loving the same things. And I think church has a lot to do with it. It helps you realize how important families are.
So what about some callings that you and Grandpa had?
It's so strange because they put Bob right in as a Boy Scout leader of the littler scouts. And he just loved it, he loved it. And until one day, for the first time, my fruit tree that I had planted of apricots, because I loved apricots, it just was blooming and had lots of apricots. And I come home from the grocery store, and the little scouts were out there in their little blue shirts and ties, and they were out there beating them to fall off the branches. I went in and told Bob, why don't you have those kids in here teaching them something? They're out there beating my apricot tree, and all the apricots are falling. Oh, he said, those little shits. So he went out, rounded them up, give them a talk about you don't do that kind of stuff with people's fruit trees because they depend on those, and give them a good talk. So I think they had a good lesson that day. He had lots of funny things happen with those scouts and him. I swear. He was a funny... But he took whatever job they asked him. So after they saw that he would take jobs, he was put into as a counselor in the bishopric.
Wow.
And he stayed in that job with different bishops for, it seemed like years. Anyway, meanwhile, I was a counselor in primary. I taught primary for years. Seems like 20 years. And then I was a counselor in the Relief Society and a counselor in the Young Women's. So I always had my job too, and he had his.
And so what were your favorite of doing all that? What were the ones that you were like, I really liked doing this, and working with the kids, or what was your favorite calling?
I liked them all pretty good, but of course primary was my favorite. As ornery as those kids were, I enjoyed them. I had one class that the bishop, I wasn't going to be there, so he says, that's okay, Sister French, I'll teach your class this week. And he taught it, and he told Bob, don't ever let your wife go off and have me teach that class. He says, I was ready to pull my hair out. And it was funny, but they were that ornery. They really were. It was hard to get those kids. They were older. They weren't the little ones. And
so they were sassy, too.
they were the age that they were getting baptized.
Oh.
So what about...
We had jobs the whole time, let me tell you.
Wow.
What about some of the things you guys did just as your family? So you and Grandpa and the boys, like, what did you all like to do together?
Or family traditions.
Yeah, or any family traditions, yeah.
Oh, we really liked being together. We'd go out and eat together, and we would actually they would go with us on a lot of the rug trips in the summer because they were out of school. And they really enjoyed that. They would help Bob with the rugs, and he kept them busy, so they liked it. They felt important. Yep.
And did you guys have meals together every
Oh,
night?
yes. That was one of our rules, was we would have supper together. The kids had to be home after school, and we had our big meal at night. And they didn't have a problem with that, really. So.
That's great. So did Dad and Mike and Corey, did they, what kind of things did they like to do? Would they spend their time out by the river? Were they playing sports or with friends? What did they like?
Well, oh laws, thank goodness there was lots of boys Mike and Corey's age, and they did everything and then some I don't know about, but oh, they would go down on, one of them's father had a big farm, and they would go to the edge of the farm, and they would camp out. And they were always without shirts. They were just as brown as the Indians. And there were some Indian boys across the river. And so they would pretend like they were fighting one another. And the kids had their bow and arrows that probably went as far as the river. And they had BB guns, and they fought with those. Just all kinds of things. They weren't little angels. I think they were really good boys growing up, so they had some fights over the truck. We only had one truck, and they had to share it. And they would fight over that, you know. But
did they stay out of trouble for the most part?
yeah, they did. They never got into trouble with the law or anything like that. Joey didn't either.
Yeah. Let's see. So what did any of them do? Did any of them do any sports in high school or anything?
Yes. Oh, yeah. They were both in football and basketball and baseball. Yeah. They did them all. Mike was very, very good football player. And he got a scholarship to go to Durango.
Really?
And he would not go to Durango. He didn't like Durango. And that's the only place that the scholarship would be good at. So...
Did you guys go to very many of the games?
Oh, all of them.
Really?
Yep, we did. Yeah, Mike was a real star, actually. And Corey, he liked to look good. He had his...
I remember the videos of his outfits.
Oh, yes. He had them on. He looked so good and everything. But he didn't want to get out there and get hit, you know, and hurt.
Yeah.
Michael was always all bummed up. But
Oh, yeah.
That is funny.
yeah.
Let's see, this one. Do you mind if we take just a little bit of a break?
Oh, I'd love it. I want to drink some water.
Gotta turn this one off for a few. Rub my face on it whenever it's nice and long. Like, don't you wish you had one of these? He hates it. Push you away, but
He's funny.
yeah,
Yeah.
he is. I'm really excited about him being in the bishopric over there.
I am too. They needed someone like him
Yeah. I
that
think so.
really knows the gospel.
Yeah.
And I'm just real glad he's in with a black man. And
Oh, is he?
Mhm.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I haven't gotten to go down and see or meet any of the people.
I
in this
didn't either,
area.
but he tells me on the phone.
Oh yeah, that's good.
And they have such a big family. It's like when they hit here, it's like, why did I clean? Why did I vacuum? Why did I do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Because they're going to be in and out, in and out.
Yeah. They love your chickens, though.
Oh, they love.
They love those chickens.
They do. I wish they could have saw the puppies when they were
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
They were beautiful puppies, real strong and healthy. She was such a good mother. She had them all out on a blanket out there. We couldn't get over it. And she was teaching them to bark.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is cute.
They were all looking at her, and they talked to them.
Yeah.
We don't realize it, but they did just what she said, and they were all out there trying to bark. And,
Yeah.
and it was so cute.
Man.
Yeah.
That's neat. Yeah, I wish we could have seen that if we were just 1 week earlier. That would have been really neat.
It would have. Yeah, one of them was a little, well, there was two of them that were little spotted. I would have liked to kept one of them.
Yeah.
But one of them had a black around his one eye.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so cute.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
he looked like that little dog in Spanky.
Yeah.
Do you remember those
Yeah, from
They-
Little Rascals.
little rascals?
Yeah.
And yeah, it had been fun to keep, but they're really hard on my yard,
Yeah.
as you can tell. Of course, that was pipeline that dug up and everything.
Yeah.
But and we didn't ever replace it because it was so dry. The ground was just parched. We could never have got it to probably grow.
Yeah.
But you kids never had really any animals, just a rabbit maybe. That
Yeah. Not really anything.
so your mother and dad neither one really were too into animals.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because sometimes I have seen my mom around. You know, she says she doesn't like animals, but then I'll see her around a puppy or a dog that's like really friendly, and she just loves the dog, and I'm like, I had no idea that you had any affinity. I thought it was like, oh, get that thing away from me.
Yeah.
But it seems like for a lot of people, you know, I think I could like any dog. I just love animals, but for some people, if there was a certain type of dog that had a certain kind of personality, that's when they love them. And I could see, you know, I've thought about it in the past, like, you know, if Tom ever, you know, passes away early or something, and you know, with his heart issues that he had recently, I was thinking she might actually like having just a really sweet dog.
I
and
know
bet
it.
she would just adore it.
Yes,
you know?
they're a lot of company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're good little friends. You know, Chelsea's allergic to dogs and cats, so she...
For her.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too
She's
bad.
got a lot of allergies, but we've talked about getting one that doesn't have fur but has
Yeah.
the hair kind of like a poodle.
Mm-hmm.
And we went over to a friend's house has a friend that lives in Boise, Idaho, and they've got a dog that's a Schnauzer, and apparently Schnauzers are one of the kinds that have hypoallergenic.
Right.
So she didn't even have to take an allergy pill or anything.
Mm-mm.
Just petting the dog and loving it. So we've thought about maybe getting a dog like that.
Right.
Probably wait till we have
children
that would really
enjoy
it.
them. Yeah. That's good. There is a couple of breeds that are not, you don't get allergic to. And I don't know. There's hairless cats, but I wouldn't want one. They're so ugly. Who would want a hairless cat?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
It's probably a good thing that there is people that like them, but
they've got bigger hearts than I do.
I think those cats come from like back in, China or those countries is where they bred them.
Yeah.
I never see them here, but I'm sure they have them.
Yeah. All right. So do you mind if we keep?
Yeah, we better, so we can end it, and you kids can get on that road.
Yeah. So let's see. What about So you talked a little bit about rug trips that you and Grandpa went on. What about any other trips that you guys did? Did you ever go anywhere else?
We had 2 miserable trips. The boys were teenagers then and in baseball, and they just felt like they couldn't miss a game. And Bob said, "You're going to miss it. This is the trip that you'll once in a lifetime with." And so we went to Maryland, and they really enjoyed that trip. We went to Joe, right there where Joe lived, everything is going on. I mean, the White House is always things going on, and right there, it's just all together there in Washington, those great big museums. And we never could get through all those museums. We went through as many as we could, but we went down into Amish country where the Amish live, riding their buggies they have beautiful horses. They take well care, and they probably breed them to be that kind of horse. And they're real neat and clean people. Their farms were beautiful, and they didn't have any tractors and stuff like our farmers do. And I don't know how they live that way, but they seem to be happy people. And that was down, where was that? Was it in Philadelphia? Somewhere out that way. There was a great big community of them. And they come from Germany, I think, is where they first came from. So they all speak German. They speak English too, but anyway, the kids they got their eyes full. There was just we went everywhere I can think of. There were tons of places we missed because you can't go to all of them in just a couple of weeks. we went to Washington's house that he built. And it was beautiful. It was amazing the things they could build at that time. Beautiful buildings. Of course, they had that talent because they were coming over from England and France and Germany and all those places, and they already had that knowledge of building. And anyway, the boys, I think they really enjoyed that trip. And it was
Have you ever been there before?
learning.
Was that your first time going?
I'm trying to think. I think I had been there before, actually.
Because you really love history, so that was probably
Yeah.
a great place for you to go.
Oh, wow, I guess. They have that big Navy base real close to where Joe lived. We went in that and had fish and stuff. And, yeah, everywhere we went, we had lobster or something, because we don't get fish like they do. And it's fresh. But, yeah, we went all over.
So that was while Mike and Corey were in high school.
Uh-huh.
So did you and Grandpa do many more trips after that, after they...
Yeah, we took them. Bob wanted to go see where the eruption of that great big volcano back by Washington State, And I'll be darned, we never got to see it. We went past where you turn off, and we didn't even know it. By then, we were in Washington, in the city. And we went up in that big tower that they've got.
The Space Needle?
The Space Needle. And we had dinner there. And we took the scenic route. From there, we saw lots of ships and all kinds of things that you don't see here, in Washington State. Beautiful. That's a beautiful state. I wouldn't like to be where it rained every day, but I guess you get used to it. And so we wanted to go see the big red trees, what do they call them?
The Redwood Forest?
Redwood Forest. Okay. As we were going down, that's the most beautiful trip if you ever want to do that. You take a certain road, and it's a big, nice highway, and you just see the ocean the whole way, and different views of it. Some of it's real rough and slapping against the rocks, and other places it was smooth, and men were out there on their ships. By the time we got to the redwoods, it was dark. The park was closed and everything. And we just sailed on through. And the kids were being really ornery. They wanted to get home to be they were having a playoff with the other kids for championship. And all we heard is, "Can we go home now? We've seen everything we want to see." It was just terrible. Anyway, we got to California and did some things there and came on home. And they made it to that important game, and they lost by a big shot. And Bob just could not get over that. He said, we drove all that way home so you could be in that. And I thought you'd at least win. But anyway, they didn't. And it was funny. But we took them on some real good trips. And we went on airplanes to see Joe. So far, you just about have to go on an airplane. Now, they really enjoyed it, though. And then the other trip we drove. And those are the only real big trips we took with the boys.
Yeah.
We'd go to Salt Lake pretty often to visit Joel and your mother, and yeah.
Did you guys ever go to General Conference?
You know, I don't think Bob ever got to go, but I went twice. Once before I ever married, I was a teenager, and they took a group of us. We got to see President Kimball, is who we got to see.
And you were in the tabernacle for that? Wow.
We actually got in, yeah.
That's amazing.
And it wasn't, you know, the tabernacle's very small compared to what they've got now.
That's incredible.
Yeah. You just have to get up early enough and you'll get a seat. But
so what about the business that you guys had here? And I know at some point you had a place down in Albuquerque as well.
yes.
Right? So
Is that on?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was just rambling.
Oh no, this is great. This is great. Yeah. So
well, it seemed like business, you know, in the 80s, it was just booming for us. We were selling rugs like mad.
yeah.
And people came to us, traders, or the people that had shops in the cities would come to us. We wouldn't even have to go out to them. That was a fun time. We met lots of people from all over. And then things started going down. Our country wasn't doing good then either.
What period of time is
In
this?
80s, late 80s, 90s. But we were still doing okay. And actually, we did quite well till 2000, you know. And then we did have a recession then all over the country. And it really hit us hard because people don't buy expensive rugs when you're in a recession. So those rugs just set. And we decided to open a shop in Albuquerque, Old Town. And we sold a few rugs, but it wasn't worth it. It cost so much to rent. And Joey run those stores, Bob would come down and I would come down. We bought a little townhouse in Albuquerque. It was cheaper than getting a motel, staying a week. So, and we were able, when we moved out, we sold it and everything. So we came out on that okay. And we come back home and said we'd never do that again. And then Bob, I don't know, it was the late 90s when we started going to St. George and just fell in love with it. And so I said, Bob, you're getting to the age you may want to retire. Let's retire here because we both love it. And he golfed, and he had a couple of golf buddies he had met. One was a major, had been a major in the Army, and retired from it. He was a real dignified man, and his name was George. And anyway, they golfed more together than any of them. But during this time that we bought I don't believe you were ever in the first house we bought. It was in a planned living area, and all the houses looked alike, but they were really nice homes and pretty. And we lived in it first, and then when Bob really got serious about retiring, Mike was going to take over the store because Joey was out in Georgia at that time. And so Mike took the store over, and he run it, and then finally he hired Giovanna, and that's when, anyway, Mike become dissatisfied with it. Corey needed a hand out in the oil fields.
Yeah.
He was working for a company, and they were always needing a hand, and so Mike would go out with him. Well, we didn't even know he was doing that for a while. But when we come back from St. George to take care of the house and everything, he was unhappy with it, and Joey was getting a divorce at that time. Brett was graduating. I went out there, and anyway, they ended up getting a divorce. And I wasn't out there when they got the divorce, but I knew they were going to. Your mother talked with me and everything and said how unhappy she was. And I said, well, that's up to you and Joel. You've got 6 little children here, and it's hard to do that kind of a thing. And but anyway, they went ahead and got a divorce, and Joey came out. So we put him to working in the store and managing it. And we were back and forth from St. George just every month. It wasn't like Bob had completely left the store or anything. And we decided to buy a bigger house because that house we had first was not big enough to accommodate your family. And so that isn't exactly why, we did that. We just found a big home that we loved. And so we decided, well, if we're going to retire here, let's get something we really want to live in from now on. So that's what we did. And Michael and Corey then got real busy in the oil business. And we're doing good. And what else would you like to know?
Yeah, so I guess how about what about your brothers and your sister? Did you and any of his family too? Did you guys go spend time with them very often? And at any point in your marriage, not just later on. It sounded like you went to Maryland and you visited. Was it Joe that lived there? So you had family. Where else did your siblings live?
Okay, I forgot to tell you that Jim came out, and we thought about being partners in the rug store. That was in the late, that was in the 90s that Jim worked there. And we could take off more, with him working there. Okay. We visited them often because they lived in Farmington. And, yeah. And Sharon, she lived here. And she put on her, she was the first person to put on a large production at the outdoor theater, and it was perfect for her show because it was back in the rocks and the old cedar trees and everything. It was just perfect. And her show run about 10 years, and she had a huge cast. And then they decided the people over that, it was Anasazi that Sharon did. And the people that, put the money out and built that and everything, they wanted more of a modern show, which never really looked good out there because it was all so many rocks, and they'd even have a coyote that came up and he'd watch the show every night. That was comical.
That is cool.
But anyway, when we decided we would move to St. George, Sharon decided she would move too. So she moved to St. George, and she bought a home, and Jeff and his wife lived with her and the children. And she lived there quite a while, longer than we did, actually. So, one funny thing about Bob going golfing. He would lose so many balls and everything. He was not an excellent golfer, but he loved the game. And we would take Reed to stay with us once in a while to give his mother a break. And so he told Reed that he could drive the cart if he'd watch for the balls and stuff and see where they went.
And
So
Reed had a handicap, right?
Reed was handicapped.
Yeah.
But he could drive the little cart, and but they said he was at the age of an 8-year-old, and he was pretty intelligent. And he made me a lot of things when he went to his school. There was quite a few kids in that school. And anyway, they were having like a golf tournament there, but they told Bob that he and Reed, if they would stay out of the way and everything, they saw no reason why they couldn't go ahead and golf, because the tournament was way on the other side of the golf field. So they were doing that, and Reed got kind of bored, and when Bob turned his back and was batting, or whatever you do, swinging the golf club, Reed took off in the cart, and he went over hill and up over dell and all over this grass, and he went down to see what was going on with the tournament. And Bob turned around, of course, and no Reed, no cart. And he just about lost it, and he did not know where Reed went. And anyway, he walked that golf field hunting Reed. And he finally found him, and he was out there at that tournament. And, Bob was so upset with him and embarrassed, because the men were trying to talk to him, and, he didn't have great language. He communicated just fine with us. And so Bob rounded him up, put him back in the cart, and off they went. And they came home, and Bob was so upset at that kid. But anyway, I said, well, what can you do? And he said, nothing. Oh, no. He said, but that's the last time I'll take him golfing with me. So that was really funny. We got a big kick out of it later on.
Yeah. Do you remember any other stories about Reed?
Oh, laws, there was so many stories about Reed. He was a character. He was called the Can Man. And on his gravesite, in fact, I think on his grave memorial stone, it said the Can Man, and then put his name under it. And every year they leave him a can of Coke on his grave. And everybody knew he was, retarded. But they just loved him. Everybody did. And people would save cans for him And we had a whole bunch of cans that he had picked up and put in black sacks. They were just full. And right here at home in this area, and he would walk the roads because a lot of cans would be thrown out, tossed out. But it wasn't just the pop cans. He collected the beer cans too. Well, anyway, we had taken Reed home for some reason, and we forgot to give him these cans in the back of the truck, or the van that we had then. And Bob was supposed to go to a bishop meeting, and he was to pick up the bishop that night. And so he did, and he said it was kind of downhill from the bishop's place. It's uphill, and then going to their home, and then downhill. And here come these beer cans that it opened, and beer cans come running. And they were under the bishop, and he was looking at them, and Bob was, he said, he was so embarrassed, and then he said, no, I'll just tell him what went on, and that Reed had been picking up beer cans and pop cans that day. And the bishop was so sweet, and he got a big kick out of that. He thought that was funny as could be, and he knew Reed, and he knew he picked up the cans. And another funny thing is this older woman and Reed had a contest going between them. They didn't like each other because they wanted all the cans. And we had the 24th of July picnic up at the church, and we all had pop cans, and we weren't especially throwing them on the ground. Reed would wait till you were through with it and come up, can I have your can? So anyway, these two were dragging their big black sacks full of cans that day. And they had a run-in, and she said, you need to go home, Reed, and take your cans home, because I need to stay here while they're playing games and stuff. And why she wanted to do that was to get all the cans. And we all got the biggest kick out of that. And
I've never heard that story before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He couldn't wait for the 24th of July because he
knew that was going to be a big deal.
It would be he'd have a big take that day. And I took him several times. They didn't have a pickup, and we did. And I would take him several times to go sell his cans. And he did real well. I mean, he'd make $200, and sometimes it was just $100 or $50. But he really was, making a business out of it. So.
And he used to ride like a four-wheeler around?
Uh-huh.
Is that right?
He did, but he got on the highway and the cops stopped him and told him that, and he didn't have a license, or anything. Yeah. And they told him he couldn't be up on the highways because it was too dangerous. Cars would hit him, and because he'd just pull his four-wheeler over and grab. He had a little wagon attached to it somehow, where he could put his cans, and so that really broke his heart. But then people would take him out in the hills, more or less, and he could find quite a few up there. So he still rode his four-wheeler until it broke down, and they wouldn't buy him another one. He was getting older. He lived to be, I think he was 64 years old when he died.
Wow.
Of cancer. And he would always say to me, I don't know why he said it, but I guess it was his way of telling me that he liked me. And he says, you know, Mary, I love you anyway. I didn't say anyway. And I'd say, anyway what? And he says, well, you take me to hunt cans, and I love you for that. Anyway. We got a big kick out of that.
That's great.
So he was my very favorite person. And everybody loved him. I mean, he had a big funeral. And
Now, how long ago was it that he passed away?
well, it was quite a while. Let's see. It probably was 10 years earlier than when Bob passed away.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. While we were in St. George, just really enjoying our home and family coming and everything, Bob never felt real well. He always had, he just looked so white at the end there. Gray is what I mean. And I said, we're going to a doctor. We'd been to lots of doctors in Farmington, and they'd say, oh, you're okay, but you do have what was it called? When you couldn't breathe real good, you'd smoked.
Oh, really?
And
emphysema?
Emphysema. He did have a start of emphysema. They'd tell him, you're okay as long as you don't overexert yourself, you're just fine. Well, when we went to the doctors in St. George, we went to a eye, nose, and throat doctor, and he saw it immediately that Bob was not all right, and he sent us to a cancer specialist, and there was x-rays and everything that was taken, and by the time the cancer and the other doctor caught the cancer, it was spread clear through his body, and they give him like 6 months to live at the most. And the cancer doctor sat down with him, and he said, I was there also, and he said, Bob, I don't usually say this to people, but he said, with such a short life expectancy, I wouldn't take the I'm trying to think of the cancer drug that they give them in there. They give it to people mainly that have just started out with cancer.
Yeah. Is it like chemotherapy?
It's chemotherapy. He said we could give you strong doses and it might put you in remission where you could live a year. And Bob said, no way. Because we had Gay's husband had died about 3 years before Bob. And he took the chemotherapy. And he was so sick the whole time. So he told Bob, don't ever take chemotherapy. He says, I think it kills you. That's what I think it does. That's what Jim, that was Gay's husband. And so Bob said, well, yes, I'm not going to take it. And he said, the best thing for you to do, Bob, is we'll give you all the medicine you need. You won't be in pain. You can go home and enjoy your family that last 6 months. And so we decided we had to come home then so he could be with all of the family, his family and friends. And anyway, he ended up in the hospital, once or twice so they could give him, they said so they could give him some, whatever that thing is, that drip that gives them energy. Mm-hmm. But Dr. Watkins said, we're going to do this because we want you to rest. You look as bad as Bob does. I guess I wouldn't wear makeup. I was in a depression. I just went into it. I couldn't bear the thought of him dying in 6 months. And
that was a surprise, right? I mean, he went from not doing well to you had this really bad news, so that was a big shock for you.
It was. He thought they'd just tell him, you have full-blown emphysema.
Yeah.
But no, he had full-blown cancer. And so we came home. Bob's son came from California to help us get Bob home, and Mike and Corey and Joey came to get him, and it was so sad leaving that beautiful home that we both loved. And anyway, we brought him home, and they'd said to check in with the cancer center so that he would always have the right kind of painkillers and medicines that he might need that would help him during that time. And so we did. And they tried to get him to take chemotherapy. And Bob said, no way. And they said, well, we have some new medicine that has just come out that we could try on you. It hasn't proven completely that it would cure you, but it could put you into remission. Bob said, no, I'm not taking anything but the pain medicine. So he came home, and he finally died at home. I had that bedroom fixed up for him.
Here in Waterflow, right?
Uh-huh,
Just there in the back.
Right. And because he couldn't climb stairs.
Right.
And I usually slept in that other bedroom, so I'd be right by him in case he wanted to get up. I couldn't help him. He was such a heavy man, even he'd lost so much weight. He was just like a big skeleton, but I could call for help, and a couple of times I did get help. It took 2 men to put him back into bed.
Really?
And so...
How tall was Grandpa?
He actually was 6'3" when he started out as a young man. Tall. He was tall. And, yeah. I don't know what he was when he passed on, but it was he really lost a lot of weight, and it was a sad time, but we got through it, and all of you kids came and saw him, Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And his kids came one time together to visit him. And then, they never did come too often to visit him. And he told me, don't be surprised if they don't come to the funeral. And so I said, okay. But they did come, but they would not speak to any of us.
Yeah.
And so, after his death, Lindsay was staying with me, and she needed to go back to Salt Lake. Well, she drove me to St. George and stayed probably a few days with me before she went to Salt Lake. And I got a telephone call from my trust lawyer from Albuquerque, and he says, Marilyn, why are you in St. George? And I said, because I had to get out of that house. I was too depressed in that house and going back in that bedroom. Giovanna was a lot of help, and Tina at that time.
Yeah.
And Alyssa and her little friend would come. They'd get off the school bus, and they would come here to the house, and they would perform acts for him and just talk to him, and he was so happy when they came.
Really?
It made his day. And Alyssa would read the newspaper to him, what he wanted to know about, and all of Tina's children drew pictures, and we put pictures in his room then that they had drew.
And they were all pretty young.
Yes, they were young. I think Corbin was in like first or second grades. And anyway, one Sunday, Corbin came to the house, and I was out under new little patio we had built while he was sick. I had to have something to do. So Sam, the Navajo man that always worked for us, he helped me, and we built that out there, put it in lawn and everything. And anyway, one day after church, I was sitting out there, and Corbin came over. And like you said, he was just a little boy, but evidently the Lord had given him an understanding of death in my behalf, because he came over and he says, I always cry when I talk about this. Anyway, he said, Grandma, don't be sad. He said, when Grandpa dies, it's like he is on the other side of a mirror, and he can see through that mirror, and he will see all of us playing in the yard. He'll see us just like we were. And he said, don't be sad, because Grandpa will be over there. He won't be in pain. He will be so happy. And I just, I needed that. And I told Corbin, I just loved him so much, because he had given me that revelation of that Grandpa was going to a better place. And as Corbin grew up, I don't know whether you noticed, but he stayed with me all through the funeral. He sat right by me, and tried to comfort me and stuff. And anyway, he was a big comfort to me. But I asked him one day, after he had grown up, I don't know why we didn't talk about it at other times, but we didn't. But I brought it up, and I said, Corbin, do you remember the day that you came over and I was sitting up under the patio and feeling sorry for myself, and you come over and you said, Grandma, don't be sad, and told me that about there was a big mirror and that Grandpa could see us, and he would be able to help us through knowing what we were doing and if we needed protection or something. And he would be like a protecting angel or something for our family. And I truly believe that. I've had you come to me and say that you had visited with him in the temple. And I've had others come to me and say that he had helped them through a crisis and stuff. So he is watching over our family, I know that. And he had told me before he died, he said, I know you love St. George and you love that house, but you need to be home with the business, because that will be your living from now on. and you need to be over there and buying rugs. And he taught me how to buy rugs, and he taught Joey and Mike and Corey. And actually, we could all buy rugs, and that was really good that he did that. But anyway, after, I'll get back to Lindsay. She took me to St. George, and I was going to just rest there and see if I couldn't get myself in better shape, because I was beside myself. And I got this call from the trust lawyer, and he said, "Marilyn, you need to come home. I need to talk to you." And he said, I don't know how the French kids found out where my office was or that I was even your trust lawyer, but he said they did. And one day I came to the office after lunch, and they were all sitting in the waiting room. They didn't have an appointment or anything. And so he said he took them in his office and asked them, they introduced themselves as being Bob's children and everything. And they said, "We feel like Dad would want us to have the store, and that Marilyn could live in the house for a while, but we need to take over the store." And that lawyer said, "You didn't have an appointment. You found out that I was Marilyn's lawyer. I'm not yours. If you want to get a lawyer, you go ahead and get a lawyer. But," he says, "I will tell you that the trust gives you nothing, no rights to anything until Marilyn dies. And then a trust will be read." And he said, "You will get your portion that your dad left you, and but I can tell you right now, you will not get that store. That is Marilyn's store, and she will live on what that store makes till she dies." So they did. They went and got him a lawyer. And it was, that was really hard on me.
Really?
And he asked me to come home, and he would visit with me about it and would go over the trust so I would know exactly how it read. So I've done just fine.
Yeah. So what about kind of your hopes and dreams for your future generations, all of your descendants moving forward?
Chase, I am the only one out of our family that has all of their children have been baptized. They've gone to the temple to get married, and they're all working for the Lord's church. And I could not have any more blessings than that. And we have been promised by the Lord that we would all be together during the millennium. So that just really makes me feel good. And I think there's several people that are just so sad because their families didn't turn out that way.
And don't have that same blessing, yeah.
But I think, Bob, I think your mother was very religious. I think she helped teach you kids the gospel. And raised a righteous family. And I do give her praise for that. And Joel helped. And so I just feel like I've been really blessed. So I don't think anybody could ask for anything better than that in life.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think that's true too, Grandma.
when you and Chelsea have your family, you'll see that they are baptized and that they stay in the church. There might be times that they fall away, but they come back. If they've been taught, they come back.
So what, would you mind sharing your testimony?
Well, I have a great testimony. I know that the church is true, and I would have really loved Joseph Smith. I think he was meant to come at the time he came and give us hope, because our world did not have the kind of religion that God meant to be. He taught it on the earth when he came, and his 12 apostles stuck by him, and even though some of them died horrible deaths, saying they knew the gospel was true. And then the people that, through Joseph Smith's day, that knew, when they picked up that Book of Mormon and read it, and really read it, they knew it was a true book. And I was very lucky because my great-great-grandfather, Ara's dad, and his wife joined the church. They knew Joseph. There wasn't that many, people at that time. They all knew Joseph. They heard him talk and give his testimony. And anyway, I have a great testimony because of them coming over to the Utah Valley with Brigham Young. And, well, I feel like we have a beautiful family. You men are all handsome, strong, diligent, and you will not stray from God's word. And I feel that I won't either. I'm not perfect, but that is to be expected. I mean, none of us are perfect, but we are God's children. And that if all of us can raise our generations up, teaching them the gospel, we'll all be together, and I have a sure feeling about that. So, yes, I love my family, all of them. So, I don't know why the Lord blessed me so much, but He did. And I say this in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Grandma, that was wonderful.
Well, thank you, honey.
No, thank you. That was really special for me.
Well, I hope so. And
Yeah.
it'll be something all of the kids and generations can have. And this is a great thing that you're doing.